Audio check.
Everybody here in person.
Check audio test.
Okay, we'll officially start the meeting. We are talking about who asked which question in the interview.
Just in case.
Just in case anyone is wondering what we're talking about.
Good morning. So you
Um,
do 4, Ari does 5, and I'll do 6.
okay, then we'll
And then you
rotate
do
through it.
7.
Okay, that's works.
Yeah. Hey, do you want to, I mean, if you feel like there's an opportunity to jump in and or follow up, or are you thinking? Are we asking, we're the only ones asking questions?
Yeah, I think we'll ask the questions and I just like, I don't. We probably don't have a ton of time to follow up, but at the very end. I might say, is there any other final like follow-up question based on the answers that we?
We're gonna be
received?
pretty,
But
we're
gonna be
squeezing a lot
pretty
in here.
tight
30
for time.
minutes, yeah. It's a
Yeah.
lot. Okay. So maybe just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Good. Good morning. Come on up whenever you are. I don't know, we're just,
Are you guys ready for me?
we're prepping,
Yeah,
but we're
we're-
kind of
we're-
done prepping, so whatever, but you take a minute to take your coat off and all that. Yeah. Morning. Okay. All right.
Quick introduction.
Yeah, let's just introduce, you want to start on, you're in San
Sure,
Diego.
Samantha Nelson, Chief Financial Officer.
Ariel Mendez, one of the city councilors.
Mayor Melanie Keebler.
Councilor Mike Riley.
I'm Kate Schneider, I'm the Executive Policy
Hi,
Officer.
we haven't met. Good morning.
Good morning.
Erin Zipper. Nice to meet you.
Yes, and we have city, Morgan Fry City Recorder and our city attorney Ian here as well.
Yep.
So we have about 30 minutes scheduled. We have a lot of questions,
Yeah.
so hopefully we'll be able to get through all of them. And then there'll be time for any questions that you might have at the end as well. And the first one is just, we do have your written materials, but take a few minutes to tell us about yourself, your background, and other key elements of your personal and professional life that has prepared and motivated you to apply for this position.
So like you said, you've got my materials, but first of all, I just want to thank everyone for having me here and good morning and for taking me, I guess, 10 minutes early since your prep was done. So you've got my materials, but a little bit about me. I've been an attorney for over 20 years now. Started off like in before I was in law school, I was a Montessori teacher. I I worked in Parks and Rec for the city of Eugene and worked with kind of some at-risk youth and started some programs with them. Then I went off to undergrad, worked for a law firm for a little while, knowing that I wanted to go to law school. Went to law school. In law school, I clerked for the EPA, where I authored a successful grant to do some research for health issues, specifically asthma for low-income kids in North Portland, and also clerked for the Oregon Department of Justice. Eventually got a clerkship with the Clackamas County DA's office, realized that I kind of fell in love with trial work. So did that for quite a while. You can see from my materials the type of work that I did with that. It was, kind of just through the normal course, kind of worked my way up. Eventually found myself down in Eugene, where I was continued as a prosecutor with the Lane County DA's office. Became a supervisor of a trial team down there. At the same time, but that I was a prosecutor for Lane County, I started teaching at the U of O Law School. Taught the trial practice course for about 5 years or so. That course is the course that teaches young budding lawyers how to try both civil and criminal cases. So spent quite a few years helping a lot of young lawyers how to find their way around the courtroom. And it was one of my favorite things I think I've ever done. And also taught the prosecution clinic along with one of the other DAs. And prosecution clinic, we brought in students from the U of O and had them in the in the DA's office with us and trying cases. Then we also taught a class that went along with that. So a lot of teaching, a lot of bringing young lawyers in, a lot of bringing people into the justice system. I spent a lot of my career doing that. So about 10 years as a prosecutor. And then after that, one of the things that always kind of was hard for me as a prosecutor was taking cases through grand jury and having, folks who have gone through something, maybe they were victims, maybe they were family members of victims. And there was always something that at the end of grand jury, they might have questions about things. Well, what do we do now? Well, what do we do? How do I take care of this? How do I take care of this bill? Like, I can't work anymore. How, or my husband's gone, or something's happened. And I couldn't help them because I represented the state, and that wasn't the type of law that I did. And so, and there was several years of that. And I started to notice there was this kind of area of the law that I was interested in, and that was representing crime victims. So the next 10 years of my career, I've been doing civil work, and that with a focus on representing crime victims and other people who have been harmed by, wrongful conduct of others. And done that for the last 10 years or so, and started working as a municipal judge. 2021. Have been doing that consistently for the last, 4 years or so now. And have been here working. I mean, I guess part of this question is what motivates me for applying for this position. That might not be a big mystery, because I've been for the last 4 months or so your kind of de facto presiding judge here for the city of Bend, and have really enjoyed that. It wasn't something I was expecting to have happen when I kind of took on a pro tem role, but I've become invested, frankly. Great group of people, have had an amazing time. We've kind of worked through a whole lot of changes, I think, in a very short amount of time, and made a lot of pretty great improvements, and are working really well together. And I'm motivated to keep that going. So I'm here.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we're going to try to take turns asking different
Sure.
questions here, and we're going to try to give everyone the same kind of experience. So we're going to just basically read these questions.
No problem.
Success in this position will require building a constructive relationship with other court staff. What would you do to foster such a relationship in person as well as remotely? Please provide some examples or an example of how you've done so in your other work experience.
Okay. Good question. And that's something that I've been doing, I think already. And one of the things that I think is important to me, and something that I've always done in my career, is to create a safe space for people to speak freely, and also to lead by example. I think that one of the best ways for folks to build strong relationships in the workplace, especially someplace like, I mean, you think about it, in a courthouse, the whole place is built on conflict, and and there's a lot of conflict that goes on every single day, but you certainly don't want that within the workplace. You don't want that within the staff or between everyone. And so it's always been my practice to try and create a safe space for everyone to voice their opinion and to lead by example. And what I mean by that is we've kind of come up with this saying at work and over the last few months, where it's not important to be right, it's important that we get it right. And that is kind of our mantra. And if you think about that, it kind of takes away the individual I need to be right about this kind of thing, and it turns it back onto the team. Like, well, what are we trying to do here? We're serving the people of Bend. We're trying to get the right answer here. And it's important to me that everybody, and that we are working together, and that a part of it for me is that I need to be approachable. And what I try and do there is it's kind of difficult to explain, but I don't have You know, I kind of came in saying like, listen, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. You know, I don't have like some big ego that you're gonna like, I know I'm the judge, but I started off as a legal assistant, and it doesn't feel like that long ago. I was changing copy paper. I was making coffee for attorneys. I remember a lot how attorneys and the attorneys in the room plug your ears, but attorneys aren't always great to staff. And I remember that. And that has stuck with me my entire career. I remember exactly the ones that treated me well and the ones that didn't. And the ones that treated me really well, what they did for me is they taught me along the way. Now, they knew that I wanted to go to law school, so they're kind of helping me along the way. But I try and do this with everyone that I work with. We'll go to court, something will happen in court, something will get kind of messy or something, and we'll fix it, we'll come back. We'll go back into my office and I'll talk with staff about it, like, okay, do you know what just happened there? Do you know why we did this and how that happened? Well, the law back, 20 years ago, it changed to this, and now it's that, and now it's that, and now it's that. And everybody's getting, I think, a bigger understanding of the big picture of the justice system. And that makes it so much better for them and easier for them to keep an eye on the details, because sometimes their jobs are like this and they're only doing like one little piece, but it's so much better for everyone if they get an idea of what the whole picture looks like. And building relationships with the staff by just communicating and educating and working together and keeping open communication and making sure that everybody knows that my door is open, come talk to me. And if I'm the one who makes a mistake, I'm the first one to admit it. And I do that over and over and over again. I do that on purpose because I want it to be really easy for someone to come to me if there's something going on. I fully believe that mistakes are problems are much easier to fix when they're little. And so far it's been going really well.
Great.
So
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So Aaron, in your view, what's the appropriate relationship between the municipal court judge and the police department? And the second part of the question is, what's the appropriate relationship between the municipal court judge and the city council? How much contact is permissible?
Yeah, good questions. And it's interesting because for both of these, for both the police and city council, I think it's not as much the amount of contact, but the type of contact that it's going to be important. I mean, always with police, got to be concerned about ex parte contact, and just, with that, you just follow the rules. That's really easy. With city council, it's a little different. I'll get to that in just a second. With police, it's interesting. We actually share the building with the police, so we have a lot of contact with them. I think that the role of the judge is obviously you've got to maintain judicial independence. You've got to be neutral, got to be unbiased. Got to have, always have to be concerned. You can't ever have the appearance of any sort of impropriety at all. I mean, all the kind of standard things that judges have to do, and that's the baseline. But it goes much farther. I mean, you got to go a lot farther than that. You've got to actually work with these community justice partners that we have, and the police are one of the big ones. So I think appropriate communication with the police are things that make the whole process that we do better. I can give you an example. I can give you a lot of examples actually of appropriate types of contact that we have with the police. Just the other day, I had a sergeant come in with some of her team, and they had some questions about traffic court, and we've changed one of the practices in traffic court for trials recently. And the police traffic team had some questions about it. And what we changed was, it used to be that when folks came in, they had a traffic ticket, they were arraigned on it, they decided they wanted their trial. Great. Right to a trial, we could absolutely accommodate that. Show up to the day of trial, the police officer is there, ready to go for trial, the defendant's there. Often the police officer will have some form of physical evidence that the defendant has never seen, which would be mostly video, dash cam video from their, body cams. It used to be that when folks came in for trial, that they didn't get they weren't able to negotiate their cases anymore. Like that, you can negotiate, you can like plead at your arraignment, or you can go to trial. I don't adhere to that. I don't want to have a court where we have any kind of a penalty for going to trial. I also think it's fundamentally not right for defendants to have to do something like that if they haven't seen all the evidence yet. And they haven't seen all the evidence if they haven't seen the videos. So what happens? People come to court and oftentimes, they'll, but they need to see the video. So I've set up time before the trial start for the officers to actually show the videos to defendants. Do you, and they have to, like, I need you to show them this, otherwise it's, we're gonna have to set this over because they get to see this evidence. And then they get to decide, what I've encouraged the officers to do, now listen, once they've seen the evidence and everything's out there, you guys can take a few minutes and decide, now that the other side has seen this, is this something you can resolve? Is this something that the police officer and the defendant can sit there and talk? And we might have 5 cases set for trial and, 1 or 2 of them might go. Maybe one person doesn't show up because we scared them off for some reason. They didn't want to come see us, but then a couple of them will resolve, and they resolve in a very positive way. Officers are working with the citizens who come in and, out in the field, these officers, the person who gets cited and the officer, that might have been a very contentious sometimes situation, but they walk out of the courtroom and they're shaking hands, and maybe they've gotten the opportunity to take advantage of adult traffic court, which they didn't want to do when they were first arraigned. But now that they've seen the video that the officer had, well, maybe the light was red, maybe it wasn't yellow, maybe. But if we don't have those opportunities, then they wouldn't be able to take advantage of traffic court. So this is kind of why we made that switch. So the officers now they're in this position where they're negotiating cases. They've never done that before. This is very common practice, pretty much everywhere else. So at first they had some trepidations. They were a little kind of like, what, are we allowed to do this? Do we get to do this? Like, how do we do this? It's taken some weeks and we're getting better with it. And they're actually, now I think it's kind of great for them. It's actually, they're walking out of there with smiles on their faces, and kind of the last interaction that they're having with that individual is much more positive than when they left, probably out on the road, like 30, 60, 90 days earlier. So the police are coming, and I'm having these conversations with them about things that are appropriate for sentencing, because they haven't done this before. The whole what's the appropriate sentence? Then it doesn't. They don't want to. What they've discovered is they don't want to offer something to that defendant day of trial if it's not something that court either would do or can do legally. An example being, if someone has a CDL, anyone here have a CDL, a commercial driver's license at all? A lot of people do, just, they don't even think about it. Like maybe they got it a long time ago and they keep it on their license. Like they keep paying for the thing later. I have a motorcycle endorsement. I haven't used it in years, but I still pay for it every time I get my license, right? So people have CDLs. If you have a CDL, you can't be in a diversion program. You just can't, because they're held to a higher standard. Well, that was a conversation that I had to have with the police to like remind them or teach them, if they didn't already know, that the law says that you can't be in a diversion program. We can't artificially mask these traffic violations if you have a CDL, or because CDL holders are held to a higher standard. And actually, if they don't, if the state of Oregon was actually audited not too long ago, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and if too many people, if they find that too many people who have CDLs have actually masked their violations, then the state of Oregon ends up getting federal highway dollars cut. Well, these things actually happen, and then that you can imagine, and and by a percentage of how many people that are being I mean, it's happened in quite a few states. I just came back from the judicial conference, and I think they said 22 different states this has happened to. We don't want that. Talk about things that would actually make the roads less safe for everybody. So this is why these things are important, that we not have, that we not have certain groups kind of sneak through and get into these programs. Well, the police need to know that in order for them to appropriately negotiate cases. And once they are armed with all of this information, they're like, oh, okay, great. Now we can do this. And would you do this if we do this? And then they can work with the public, and they can, they come away from there. It's just so much better of a product. And it's just, they come in and ask me questions about, the law and what is appropriate and what's not. And I think I've established with them that, coming in and talking to the judge isn't scary, and it's okay, and my door is open. And I think that's, And as long as we're keeping it in that realm of, you know, I'm not helping them or their side or them doing anything, for, you know, I'm just helping them with I'm helping the whole process, of what we do in the court by the communications with, the police. So, I think that's going really well so far. So the other part of this was
Yeah.
the part with the city
Council
council.
part,
Yeah, this is important, in a lot of ways. And I think there's something big coming up that, that we're gonna have, that there's gonna have to be some decisions being made because, obviously, you know, the judge needs to be independent, can't be involved in policy. You're not gonna get involved in politics, not gonna, you know, there's some things that are obviously need to be left to others. But city council needs to know what's happening with the courts. It's really important. And I don't think, you know, hearing from the court once a year or twice a year or something and just kind of reading you know, what's been going on with the court is really quite enough. But it might not always be the judge who should be the one to do that, to inform the city council. We have a new staff member coming on. We have a court manager coming on. One of the first things that probably has to happen is determine, I'm looking right over at Samantha, but is determining whose role is going to be what. We are not a circuit court. We are a municipal court. We are not controlled by the OJD, the Oregon Judicial Department. The lines are more clearly delineated between court administrators and judges there. Everyone kind of knows what their jobs are. It's amorphous when it comes to municipal court. I mean, municipal law and how all this, you know, how we want to form this is kind of up to us, like what job is the judges and what job belongs to the court administrators. What often happens, what I see happen sometimes is the judge is the only one that appears in front of city council and then well, a couple of things happen. One, everyone thinks that it's the judge that does everything. It's not. The court administrators really do most of the work. I mean, the judge's job really is to go in there and be on the bench and control what happens, on the bench. The court administrators really do the bulk of, you know, the creation of the programs and the work with the staff and all that. They should really be in on the communications with the court. It should be kind of an effort between, you know, there should be the administrator and the judge. But now is a perfect time for us to figure out whose role is what and who should be the party that comes to talk to the city council more often. And now's the great time to do that because you're going to have a new judge starting a new term. You're going to have a new not city manager. You're going to have a new. It's just it. No, you're going to have a new court manager. And it's the perfect time to, I mean, in fact, if we don't do that, this doesn't happen now, then there could cause, you know, can cause issues down the line of people not quite, being able to delineate whose role is what. This is going to be a major factor in what type of communication the judge has with city council, because I think sometimes there's the content of the communication between the judge and city council should be pretty minimal. But the problem is that because of that, I think sometimes city councils aren't really informed on everything that happens with the court. So that needs to be filled in somewhere. That's probably the court administrator. And so we need to delineate who's going to be doing what, and things that aren't appropriate for the court to talk to city council about. You still need to know about, but it needs to come from somewhere else. That's what makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I do a quick time check?
Yeah,
sorry.
We started early.
We started around 9:05, so 30 minutes. We've got about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
call it
okay.
36 and several substantive questions.
Yeah.
left.
I know, we have a back.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. You're doing it now, so it makes sense that you're talking about
Yeah.
what you're doing. Okay, yeah, so we have 3 more questions that are kind of substantive, so maybe just
Yeah.
take the answers down a little bit. And you've talked about some of this already too, but there may be disagreements or even conflict among staff about how to approach a problem or a challenge facing the court, from administration to policy and programs. How do you approach those circumstances, and provide an example from your previous work experience about approaching disagreements and conflicts?
Yeah, I probably touched on some of this already, and I'll kind of like repeat my answer a little bit, but I definitely create a safe place for everyone to speak up, and definitely want to lead by example. in a lot of different ways. But, encouraging other folks to, give their opinion on things and understand, let everyone know that everyone's thoughts and, are valued. I mean, we've got some smart people that are working in this office and they come from different backgrounds and, but we can't get their expertise out of them if they're not willing to speak up. And so everyone needs to feel comfortable doing that. I think conflict comes from misunderstandings, and misunderstandings often come from people just not communicating enough. And I think we've done a lot of, I think that when we we have kind of open lines of communication, that's when we do our best work and we avoid conflicts. Again, in a situation where we are surrounded by conflict, the whole job is conflict. And so how do you avoid that when that is what you're surrounded with all day? Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Please describe your approach to diversion programs. And you touched on this
Yeah.
briefly. When are they appropriate and how extensively should a municipal court use them?
Yeah, good question. So there's kind of two, it's different in criminal. We're just, the violation level, so I can leave some of the theories on diversions for criminal behind. But as far as for what we're talking about, there's kind of two basic ideas with diversion programs. There's kind of like rehabilitation and restorative justice. Rehabilitation kind of theory is that, well, we want to try and fix this. We want to reduce the chance of recidivism. So this would be folks that maybe don't have, say, a traffic case, that don't have a bad record, and we want to send them to traffic school, kind of like, we're going to remind you of some of the rules of the road here, make you jump through some, get some reminders. Maybe it's been a while since you've taken a course like this, or maybe you never have. And then what we're trying to do is reduce the risk of you coming back to see us for the same type of thing. It improves public safety, and it gives the person a chance to keep the conviction off their record. The other type, and that's kind of what we're doing right now. Restorative justice is a different type of take on diversion programs, and that's more where there's a diversion, and the person is able to kind of do something to give back, to kind of fix the problem that was caused, or to have some alternative means of kind of correcting the issue. I think we're doing a good job right now of the ways we're using diversion with our adult traffic safety, our youth traffic safety program. We've kind of tweaked the youth traffic safety program a little bit recently. And then we have the fix-it ticket programs where essentially that's kind of a diversion, because you're coming in, you're pleading no contest, we're giving you an opportunity to repair the whatever the issue was that caused the citation to begin with. And if you do, we'll dismiss it after with a fee at the end. What we're lacking is that restorative justice piece. I wrote a little bit about this in my supplemental answers. We're missing the piece where we don't have a functional way for people to participate in these things if they can't afford the fines, or if they can't afford the monetary costs of some of these things. So I think that reduces the access to justice. We can solve that by creating waivers for financial eligibility of people for certain things. We can also really for filing of more things for like filing motions and things. Right now, we don't have any ability to do that. Someone, they can't afford to file their, a certain motion, then we don't have a method for them to sign a waiver. We need to do that. The other thing is we don't have a community service or road crew, an alternative way that people can pay down their fines. It's pretty common for something like that to exist. You've got folks who, if they don't get the fines paid off, then they can't take advantage of the diversion program. Well, if there was an alternative way that they could pay for the fine, like giving back to their community through community service or road crew, something like that, then more people could take advantage of the diversion programs that we have. And it would improve the access to justice. We're not there yet. That is something that our court desperately needs. So I like the diversion programs that we have. I think they cover the right types of cases. I think our delivery system and our access to justice needs some work, but we're working on it.
Thank you.
Describe your experience in serving underrepresented communities. What did you learn from this experience and how might those lessons show up in your courtroom?
Yeah. I kind of went through a lot of what I did earlier in my career, and I can pick out, working with the at-risk youth when I was younger, and working with the folks when I worked with the EPA and the low-income folks on the asthma research. And, as a DA, I worked with a lot of underrepresented communities. Obviously, as a judge, I've worked with in mental health court, and I ran the 370 court. 370 court it's short for ORS 163-370, which has to do with aid and assist. So people who have been found by the court to be unable to aid and assist in their own defense, and it's the court's obligation to get them well enough so that they can aid in their own defense. And it's a kind of a long process. And that was a specialty court that I ran. So I've had, I've interacted with a lot of folks from underrepresented communities. How is it affected, and how does it come into my courtroom? I start talking about things like restorative justice. I start talking about like we need better ways to serve the community. We need better ways to serve the people of Bend. We need more access to justice. We need to find ways to make it so that it doesn't really, that there aren't consequences for people that are not really what we intend because we don't have the right programs in place. An example being, if someone's having difficulty putting food on the table, it's not going to be as big of a priority to come to court and to take care of your traffic ticket. But if you don't come to court and take care of your traffic ticket, then your license could get suspended. And if your license gets suspended, you could lose your job. But if you lose your job, and you're in an even worse situation, well, if we go back to the beginning and we make it so that the person knows from the beginning that, hey, and it's on our website and it's very clear, it's like, this is what you can do to fix this. And you can actually go through this entire program. And you might be able to keep it off your record, or even if you don't, even if you have bad history and you don't have the money to pay the fine, you can go work it off. You can go work, a day of road crew where you can do, 8 hours of community service and pay it off. And then you won't lose your license. Then you won't lose your job. We don't have a lot of those opportunities yet, but that is, I become a little obsessed with those kinds of things because I've worked with so many underserved populations. You can't help but see those things. You can't help but see the system and how it affects people. Yeah, that's definitely a priority for me.
Oh, that's the end of the questions that we had, and we're basically out of time, but
Yeah.
we have room if there's any questions that you wanted to ask us.
I don't particularly have any particular questions about the job itself, which might not surprise you. That I think I'm pretty aware of what I might be getting myself into. I guess I just take the opportunity, since I have this audience here, just to say that really enjoyed the time that I've, this wasn't something I was really expecting to kind of walk into, or to work as much with the people that I've been working with, but to a person, they've been fantastic. Really smart, bright group, have been very welcoming and patient with me. And I think we're a good team, and we've been making some really positive changes, which I'm happy to talk to people about offline at some point. But I think we're really doing some innovative things, and we're kind of hungry to do more. I don't have to tell anybody here that the city of Bend is growing and the court is growing. And I think it's probably, I've been looking at some numbers of things that we might be able to expect in the future. I think it's going to grow faster than we're maybe even imagining. And I'm excited. So that's all I have, unless you guys have anything else for me.
No.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Thanks so much, Erin.
Thanks, everybody.
For coming in.
Yeah.
So, counselors, the next candidate is scheduled to start at 9:50.
Sure.
Don't know if they're gonna arrive early, but there is a gap. You could always pause the meeting and resume once.
Yeah, why don't we just pause?
Right.
We're not gonna deliberate or anything, so
Yeah.
we'll just pause. Okay, hi Carolyn, come on up. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
You're our second interview today. So we're gonna introduce ourselves and then we have a few questions for you that the counselors are gonna ask. And we have about 30 minutes total for all of our questions and we have 6 questions. So just keep that in mind
Okay.
when answering. Okay, yeah, start down here, Sam.
Yeah, I'm Samantha Nelson. I'm the Chief Financial Officer.
Counselor Ariel Mendez.
Hi, Mayor Melanie Keebler.
I'm Mike Riley, City Councilor.
Morning, I'm Kate Schneider. I'm the Executive Policy Officer. I'm City Recorder Morgan Travis.
And I didn't introduce myself last time. I'm Ian White, City Attorney.
Just getting you.
Okay, so we do have your written materials in the letter that you just gave to us, which we all just read. But if you want to just take a couple minutes to tell us about yourself, your background, and other key elements of your personal and professional life that have prepared and motivated you to apply for this position.
Okay. My name's Carolyn Powell. As you can see from my resume, I've spent most of my career working in prosecution. I wanted to be a lawyer since I was very young, and I knew I wanted to do criminal law. Initially, I thought I wanted to be a defense attorney, but only represent innocent people. In my teen years, then our house was burglarized, and nobody was ever caught, but I suddenly took the perspective of the victim as opposed to the defendant. And so I changed. I wanted to do prosecution. And in high school, I did the mock trial and I was on the prosecution team and really enjoyed it. Then I went to law school, and when I graduated, then there was a hiring freeze at the time in 1992, and I couldn't afford to not work. So I went into civil practice for a while and sort of got my feet stuck in the cement for a little bit until it came time to realize that I really wanted to go back and pursue prosecution. And so then I started working for the Santa Clara DA's office, which was a job I loved. And at the end of my career there, I was a supervisor. I was a supervisor for the juvenile team and then for the misdemeanor team during COVID. And that was challenging. And it was also very challenging for my kids. I have 2 kids. I have a 17-year-old son who's a senior at Summit and a 10-year-old daughter who's a 4th grader at Miller. And they were not doing well with online school. And as a single mom, there wasn't a parent that could be home with them to help them with it. And it just was sort of a perfect storm that I needed to prioritize them over work for a while. And so some friends of mine had moved up to Bend, and we'd been up and visited previously and loved it. So we came up for a vacation and decided that we would stay, bought a house and moved up here. And so I took some time off to be a mom and to get them back and situated in a new environment. But I found myself at a loss. I'm not ready to be retired. And I still wanted to do something in the public sector. Before I got my law license here in Oregon, then I worked at a school as an educational assistant for a year. And that was not for me. I found it very worthwhile, and it's definitely a very challenging and important job, but I didn't feel like it was the best use of my particular skills. And then I met Carrie Hathorn, and she was in need of help in the Crook County DA's office. And so I started working with her initially as the assistant chief, and then when the chief left, as her chief. Unfortunately, going back to my children, a full-time job in Crook County with a 1-hour commute was not so amenable to a great balance. So in December, I decided that given some issues my daughter was having with school and needing help, that I needed to be back and be present here again. But again, I find myself in the position of not wanting to do that all 100%. And I still want to serve the community. And so I think that this would be a great opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to take turns reading these questions to try to give everyone a similar experience. My question for you is, success in this position will require building a constructive relationship with other court staff. What would you do to foster such a relationship in person as well as remotely? please provide some examples of how you have done so in your other work experience.
As a team leader, as a supervisor in California, then one of the objects was to bring your team together and make a cohesive unit. And that was when I was supervisor of the juvenile unit. And at that time, a lot of them were sort of senior attorneys who were coming off rest assignments, and they weren't really, some were brand new, and there wasn't a lot of bonding between them. There were different generations within the office. And so I started doing team lunches, and I would give awards when somebody won a contested disposition hearing. Then we would have awards, and we had one fun situation where a defense attorney actually sent a sort of sarcastic letter of appreciation for one of my attorneys. And so I had a little plaque made for him and saying for great work in representing the defense attorney. And I had the DA come in and present the plaque to him. And it just sort of, it brought the team together, and they enjoyed like just sort of those fun things. And then with COVID, with my misdemeanor team, who was freaking out because they were all brand new attorneys and they wanted to get out there and get trials and they couldn't. So we would do things like meet out in an outdoor location so we could still be together and bond. And I also would set up Zoom trivia nights where we would do trivia online and do Family Feud nights. And then in order to help them also gain exposure to other teams in the office when people were all having to work remotely, I would set up challenges between the misdemeanor team and, for example, we did a challenge with the homicide team. And what I did is I mixed them so that there were homicide and misdemeanor teams members on both teams, so they would have an opportunity to sort of chat as well. And I think in Cook County, I think that was one of the things that I really brought to the office was I know that when you work in a legal setting, it is a team. It's not an attorney with support staff. It is truly a team. And making everybody know that their contribution is important and valued. And so we would do, again, team lunches or outings after work. I organized at one point, I wanted to sort of bring the whole law enforcement community in Crook County together. So I organized a taco and margarita night out, and we invited all of the law enforcement and the DA's office and probation. It was really funny.
Great, thank you. So Carolyn, in your view, what's the appropriate relationship between the municipal court judge and the police department? And then kind of part two of that is, what's the appropriate relationship between the municipal court judge and the city council, and how much contact is permissible?
Mm-hmm. I think obviously there's got to be contact. I would imagine the municipal court judge needs to respond to you and provide information as necessary and as asked for. And I think also with the police department, I've worked with police officers, obviously, for the majority of my career. I've recognized that as a judge, it's going to be slightly different because while you're still going to have that positive collegial professional relationship, you also will need to be very careful not to show signs of preference or having your mind made up already because you happen to know that officer or have worked with them. So I think really the key comes down to discussion of sort of policy level stuff and how things are working, and staying away from discussion of particular cases and particular individuals.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add about the council part of it? Well,
Yeah, contact with city
the
council
city council,
decision makers.
yeah.
I would say the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There may be disagreements or even conflict among staff about how to approach a problem or challenge facing the court. From administration to policy and programs, how do you approach those circumstances, and provide an example from your previous work experience that illustrates that approach?
I think in order to come to the best solution, then you need to hear all viewpoints. And so when there is disagreement, I think the best thing to do is get people in the room and have a constructive conversation, understanding that everybody's viewpoint is valid. Because oftentimes I find that people who have a different position in the office see problems that as the attorney, I might not recognize. I might not know that the court doesn't take the filing that way or things like that. And so I think that ultimately a lot of stuff can get hashed out just by having everybody's perspective and seeing all of the different viewpoints. If there is some disagreement, then I think the person in whose what's the word I'm looking for, bailiwick, but anyway, the person whose authority it should be the one to ultimately make the decision after having had that full conversation. For example, if it's something to do with the administration of the courts, then I would imagine that would be the court manager. If it's something to do with a legal aspect or the types of cases or how particular cases are handled, I would think that would be the judge. In terms of a particular example, obviously as an attorney, a lot of times we've staffed cases and discussed them, but I've also in Santa Clara County been involved in a few cases where there was legitimate disagreement among people as to how it should be handled. We had a particular case that I can think of when I was on juvenile. There was a 15-year-old who had been convicted of homicide because he and his friend had stabbed a co-student to death because they wanted to see what it felt like to kill a human being. And while he had already been sentenced and was actually in prison, then the law in California changed that you couldn't no longer prosecute adults as children under 16 as adults. And so there was a lot of dispute about whether we challenged that on the appellate level or not within the office. Some people thought we just needed to agree that he could no longer be treated as an adult. The problem being that he was already also past the age of juvenile court jurisdiction at the time that the law came down. So he was just going to be released with no supervision at all. And I was very close with the family. And so we had a big discussion and with the DA and assistants and supervisors. And ultimately the decision was made to appeal it. We were unsuccessful. But I advocate for my position, but if I come out on the wrong side, then I accept that as well.
Thank you. Next question is, please describe your approach to diversion programs. When are they appropriate and how extensively should a municipal court use them?
I think diversion programs are very important, especially for youthful offenders and first-time offenders. I think they should be used when it's not a public safety issue, for example. I mean, there's a difference between speeding at 50 miles an hour down Wall Street and speeding on a remote road where there aren't other people around. But I do think that for kids who are just learning, and one of the things that I found when I worked in juvenile is that a lot of times all they need is contact with the law and they're not going to do it again. That they're testing their boundaries, and once they hit that boundary, then they can get back on the right track. And so not every juvenile needs to have the book thrown at them. And so I think that giving them that sort of, okay, you did this, don't do it again, and giving them the opportunity to not have that be on their permanent record or their driving record for insurance purposes. Obviously, insurance for young kids is very high as it is.
Sorry, what was very high as it is?
Insurance
costs.
Oh,
costs for young
Yeah.
drivers.
Gotcha.
As a mother of a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
And, for the people who generally are abiding by the rules of the road, but get a speeding ticket, I think that it's appropriate to give them a shot at diversion without having that go on their record. Obviously, if there's repetitive behavior, then that no longer is appropriate.
Thank you.
Carolyn, describe your experience in serving underrepresented communities. What did you learn from this experience and how might those lessons show up in your courtroom?
I have worked, a large portion of my career was spent in handling sexual assault cases, and a lot of those were most of them were with children, and a lot of them were in underserved communities who were placed in, unfortunately, situations where they were more easily victimized and oftentimes not believed by their families. And one of the things that I learned is that you have to meet people where they are. Not everybody has the same life experience, and you can't expect other people to respond in the way you might think that you would respond. So you have to take into account where they're coming from and what their background might have been. Another way that I like to touch on is that when I lived in California for the last 10 years that I was there, my next door neighbors were emergency foster parents, and they had over 100 kids coming in and out of their house, many of them from obviously underrepresented communities and low income communities and kids of color. And they all had very different traumas that they were experiencing. And you have to figure out that trauma and what they need from you. And that's the same in a courtroom. And I've always tried to do that as a DA. Like, a mother stealing milk to feed her children is different for me than somebody who just thinks it's fun to try and swipe something at the store. You have to look at the background. And I think that that's something that I've been good at in my career. And I think that would serve me well as a judge.
Thank you. So yeah, we have a little bit of time left here, and any questions or you want to ask us, or any additional information you want us to know?
I had a couple of questions, one of which is I was noticing on the responsibilities of the municipal court judge that there was things like doing search warrants and subpoenas. I'm wondering, is that not part of the what is seen in this position, given that it wasn't listed in the items that you thought would be primary responsibilities?
I can speak to that. This is Ian Lighthizer, city attorney, forgot my name. Just so our office has, some of us will appear as advocates in the court when it's allowed to do so. Most of the time it's not, because most folks are unrepresented. We also advise the court. I can say the judge and court staff. I can say in that role, search warrants, they're not that common in a municipal court setting. So it is something that a municipal judge in Bend needs to be comfortable with handling, but it is kind of a pop-up ad hoc sort of thing, given that so much of the work involves traffic violations and other things. So part of the job, but relatively uncommon.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question that I had was, are there formal mechanisms for interaction between the judge and the city council and the police department in terms of scheduling and just best practices? And I would imagine that at different times, there are different priorities and different concerns regarding city code violations or parking or traffic violations, if we're seeing an increase in speed in a particular area or things like that. How does that work?
We generally have had sort of a once a year update from the judge in the past, but I think we're open to new ideas on how to stay abreast of the court. And we're going to be having some expansion. We're having a new staff hired and sort of reorganizing the court a little bit. And we're also going to probably be starting automated traffic enforcement later this year. So we're just anticipating changes. And so, yeah, there's not a set way to do that. And so we're open to continuing that or communicating in different ways if that's appropriate too.
Yeah, I would just add that I think the the practice has been, as the mayor described, that it's generally been once a year with an update, but I think there has been some conversation about what the future might look like. We do have some anticipated changes coming up, and so given some of the potential for changing the structure of the court management a little bit, there might be some opportunities for changing that kind of interaction with council, at least. I won't speak to the opportunities for interaction with the police department. But I don't know if you want to add anything, Councilor Riley.
No, I think Ben's growing a lot and the court's growing and the demands on the court's going to grow over time. So there's probably important for us to be maybe kept a little more frequently abreast of what's happening with the judge and the court manager.
And then just what are next steps? When do you anticipate?
So this group will be making a recommendation to council as a whole body, and then the council will make the final decision. And we have 3 interviews today, and that's it. So, we're talking about it on Wednesday, or are we pushing it to the next meeting?
I don't think it's on the agenda for Wednesday, so
Yeah.
maybe the
The second meeting in April would be
Okay.
when the final decision would be made. Yeah.
Right. Anything else I can answer for anybody?
No, anyone
think
has a
so.
follow-up?
Yeah.
No?
Thank
Okay,
you.
good.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
very
Bill.
much.
Yeah.
I'm gonna raise a similar question as last time. It's 10:05. The next applicant is scheduled to start at 10:25.
Take a pause.
Yeah, so we
Yeah,
take,
let's
take 5
pause.
and then if they show up. we can
Yeah,
start
pause.
from there.
All right, we are back for our last interview. If you want to come on up. Welcome, Injiga.
Morning.
Counselors?
So we're just gonna introduce ourselves. We have 30 minutes for the interview. We have about 6 questions for you, so just think about that when timing your answers. And we'll start with you, Sam.
I'm Samantha Nelson. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. Hello.
City Councilor Ariel Mendez.
Hello.
Mayor Melanie Keebler.
Hello.
Mike Riley, City Councilor.
Hello. Kate Schneider, Executive Policy Officer. Hello. Morgan Fry, City Recorder.
Back to me, I'm Ian Lighthizer, the city attorney. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Great. Well, thanks for being here. Just to start, we do have your written materials, but wanted to start by asking you to take a few minutes to tell us about yourself, your background, and other key elements of your personal and professional life that have prepared and motivated you to apply for this position.
Sure. So goodness gracious, this is about my 23rd year as a lawyer now, and that time flies when you just think about that. And in those 23 years, I've been fortunate enough to have a wide variety of experience in government. I've worked in the state government, the city government, the county government, and now the federal government. I have yet to work in a municipal government. Nonetheless, I pretty much understand the bureaucracy of all different types of government, and that things work a certain way. There's certain red tapes that have to be dealt with. There's certain procedures that have to be dealt with, certain patterns, habits, and practices that have to be dealt with. So to that end, I understand that as a basic root of my practice over 23 years. And I think for motivation, you'll see from my resume that my jobs have tended to jump towards being a deputy of something, to then being a chief deputy of something, and then moving on. And my goal always was to be a judge. I find myself to be somewhat of a neutral and fair personality type. I'm always the peacekeeper in my family, always have been, and so I like to be the neutral if possible. I'm good at being a paid advocate, but if I didn't have to be, I'd prefer that just for my own personal existential happiness. That being said, now that I currently work as a federal administrative law judge, recent federal happenings have made it so that I'm looking elsewhere to be a judge. And since I live in Seattle right now, and Oregon's a sister city, and I've worked previously in Portland, and have basically been through Bend many times, and I love Bend and just beautiful. These are all the reasons why I applied, so that I could continue my judgeship, continue my neutrality, in a beautiful place, in a place that I'm familiar with. Those are the reasons that really motivated me to apply.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to read through these questions and just try to present a similar experience for each of the candidates.
Of course.
So my question for you is, success in this position will require building a constructive relationship with other court staff. What would you do to foster such a relationship in person as well as remotely? Please provide some examples of how you have done so in your other work experience.
Well, I am a big proponent of the legal assistant being the backbone of anything. I can't get my job done if they don't get their job done, and I need to support them to get their job done. And that's equally true of paralegals. It's equally true of anybody who helps an attorney or who helps a judge get their job done. So you have to have a cooperative work environment. The judge is no better than any of those people. They have a different role, but just because they are a judge does not mean that they are better. They have a different educational set, they have a different skill set, but we all have to work together, and a judge cannot come into something. I call it black robitis. You can't have black robitis. You have to be there to be part of a team, and the team is to effectuate a just result for whatever it is that you're doing. So to that end, I would make sure that my staff know that I'm approachable, open door policy. I'm not above them. I'm not that kind of person who has to go have trivia nights all the time with my people that I work with, but I certainly will go if invited. I'll certainly have Christmas parties and things like that for people, to show them that there's a morale that we all share in part of the team. So I think I would just make sure the first thing that they know is that we're part of a team. I'm not above them, that we should all be working together. If they have questions, come to me. If I have questions of them, I'm going to come to them because I don't know everything, especially if I come here, never worked in Bend before, never worked in municipal law before. I can't come into this thinking I know everything because I don't. So they are going to have they're going to have knowledge and institutional knowledge I don't have, and I would be a fool not to ask for their expertise. So I think that's important too. So they understand it's a two-way street.
Thank you.
So Andrew, in your view, what's the appropriate relationship between the municipal court judge and the police department? And a kind of a similar question, what's the appropriate relationship between the judge and the city council? And how much contact is permissible in your view?
Sure. We'll start with the police. So I have been, when I worked at the Portland Police Bureau, or I went to the city of Portland, I was assigned to the Portland Police Bureau. So I have a lot of experience working with law enforcement. I respect what they do. I show that respect when I speak with them. And to that end, I would be respectful towards them because they have certainly a very difficult job to do. To that end, when we are engaging in community-oriented things together, such as if there's toy drives or if there's public speaking engagements where I need to have conversations with them, happy to do so in the most collegial way possible. But there is a very fine line that you have to walk and make sure you don't go into ex parte communication on any specific case that you might have. So obviously I wouldn't want to be talking to my officers about, hey, you have that case coming up, 7 o'clock on, that next week. Can I talk to you about it? Well, no, you can't, because that would be ex parte communication. But if you want to talk to me about, hey, we are trying to raise money for such and such, and it'd be great to have a municipal court judge there, with some kind of, constitutional law day, I'm like absolutely on board. So, it's just walking that fine line between let's not talk about cases, but if you want to talk about anything else, I'm open to do that. With city council, I won't be representing you, so I don't have that same, ex parte communication issue. To the extent you need to talk to me or I need to talk to you, I'd hope to be that same sort of open communication channel. And if there's anything more formal like this that needs to happen, also happy to come in and talk formally with you on the record, live streamed, whatever necessary it is. But yeah, just open, communicative. It's the kind of person I am. So if you need to talk to me, that's great. Since I don't have those ex parte channels, I think we can talk to meat and bones a little bit more about things that might be of interest to you. Like if you're interested in the way I do something, you're interested in the way I view a city council ordinance, like why am I interpreting the ordinance this way? I'm happy to tell you why I'm interpreting that way. If you're like, well, we think maybe, based on what our city attorney might have to say that they're seeing it differently, I'm happy to look into that and say, do I agree? Don't I agree? And then explain to you why I do or don't. So to that end, it's just whatever you have questions of me, I'm happy to answer them. And if I have questions of you, I'd hope that you'd be happy to answer them so that we can still be that Big Bend team of people trying to, in my case, effectuate justice.
Okay, there may be disagreements or even conflict among staff about how to approach a problem or challenge facing the court, from administration to policy and programs. How do you approach those circumstances and provide an example from your previous work that illustrates your approach?
Well, I hope by now you know that my word of the day is communication. I'm big on communication, big on letting people know that they can come to me and I expect them that I can come to them so that we can have a two-way stream of communication. And I'll give you the example that you're looking for. So back when I worked in the Nevada, state of Nevada, I was assigned to the Nevada Department of Corrections as my primary person that I was assigned to. And as the chief deputy of that, we obviously almost all had pro se litigants, and they were very difficult sometimes to deal with, especially when their life in prison, they have nothing better to do than to just keep you busy by motioning the court to death. And we had one specific aspect I can think of where this particular person was papering us to death, and the person that was assigned to them was like, that's it, I'm not doing anything else. I'm like, well, you really can't not do anything else. You can ask the court for relief. You can ask, make motions to preclude further, frivolous filings, but you can't just not do anything. But they had their wits' end. They said it was a toxic work environment. They were done. So I had to really smooth that over with them. I'm like, look, if that's truly how you feel, let's not just quit. We're going to have you substituted out. You're going to have to file the filings to substitute yourself out. And then we're going to have to do everything. We're going to get somebody else on. I put myself on as a second co-chair because the buck stops with me as the chief. So I needed to make sure that that was handled correctly. And then we had to go back to this other person and I had to say, okay, let's talk through this toxic work environment. Is it really toxic for you because of the inmate? Is it toxic for you because you felt I made you do it? Is it toxic for you because it's just litigation generally with inmates that you've done over and over to the point now you feel like you have no soul left? Talking to people, and there's a psychological component of my job. I'm not a psychologist by any stretch of the imagination, but you can't just not have the tough talks. You can't just not do what needs to be done to get to the heart of the matter. And we were finally able to get to a point where it was really just not a good fit for her in that division. So I was able to make recommendations that she moved to a different division. And that was the end of that. So, I think it's just, communication and really trying hard to meet people where they're at and to try to get to the root of the matter of why it is they are feeling the way they are and go from there.
Thank you. Please describe your approach to diversion programs. When are they appropriate and how extensively should a municipal court use them?
So my background is in a big, big city, Las Vegas, Nevada. So when I was a prosecutor, we had lots of diversion programs. We had a DUI diversion program. We had a veterans diversion program. We had a homelessness diversion program. So we had a wide variety of diversion programs. And one of the things that I would do as a DA is plead cases down, inclusive of a diversion program as the probationary condition. And I was all for that because especially if you have a first-time offender or you have a repeat offender, but their challenge is homelessness or their challenge is mental illness, and they're not necessarily, they don't have a particularly negative mens rea. They're not, a nefarious person, but they just don't have a house. They don't have an ID. They don't have, just access to mental health resources. Diversion is great for those people because then you don't A, clog your jails up with people who don't need to be there, and B, you give them a chance to perhaps get some help that they need. The unfortunate thing that you would find in a lot of those programs, especially with the drugs and the homelessness, is people just wouldn't show up. So they'd ultimately fail and they'd ultimately, have the conviction because it had been previously a suspended, and then, they fail it, they'd get the conviction on their record. I don't know if that was because the diversion program itself didn't do enough to reach them. But I think in the beginning, you just have to have it. It just has to exist. You just have to have the access. So the people who want to change and who want to get better can get better. So I'm all for diversion programs. It keeps the jails clear and it helps the people who need the help who aren't necessarily bad people who just have challenges. That said, if I have a 2-time offender, a 3-time offender, a 4-time offender who's trying to wiggle out of responsibility and accountability by saying, hey, can't I have that diversion program? I'm a lot less likely to give them access to a diversion program because then at that point you have to say, well, they're just using the diversion program as a mechanism to escape accountability. But you don't want to put like somebody who's a bad seed in an element where you're trying to help other people because then that can poison the well, for lack of a better word. So you just have to be really cognizant of the reasons why somebody might want diversion, and how many times they've had a chance to reform and have not. And especially if they've had resources and they just didn't change. I mean, you have to really, that's what judges do. I mean, they make the tough calls. They are the ones that say, look, this is your 4th DUI. This clearly isn't working. What we're doing isn't working. Maybe it's jail time that's going to work. You got to be able to make that tough call. Or if it's somebody who, the 4th time that they've stolen toilet paper from the 7-Eleven or whatever it is, you got to say, okay, do you have a house? No. Well, okay, I can kind of see why you're stealing toilet paper from the 7-Eleven, but let's see if we can't get you access to homeless resources so that you don't have to, use the restroom in public. So I think they're great. I just think you have to have the wherewithal to know when they should be used and when they shouldn't. And yeah, the more diversion programs, the better, I think. But then again, that's coming from a big city perspective with a lot of financial resources for diversion programs. So whatever you have with whatever budget you have is better than nothing.
Thank you.
Describe your experience in serving underrepresented communities. What did you learn from this experience and how might those lessons show up in your courtroom?
Well, as a prosecutor, one of the things that I was assigned to was domestic violence. And so I had my fair share of people who are Hispanic, especially in Las Vegas, and their cultural norms are different than the cultural norms of the standard typical white American, in that they're a very patriarchal culture. And so to them, they were very hesitant to prosecute on domestic violence. But in Nevada, we couldn't dismiss the case unless we had specific reasons A, B, and C that had to be met. And so to try to help them understand that ABC were not met and they had to testify, we're sorry, you just have to testify. It was very difficult and we had to go through interpreters a lot. So I have a lot of experience going through interpreters. And that's just not there. I mean, I go through interpreters now as a federal administrative law judge whenever I need to speak with somebody who is usually Hispanic or Latino of some sort. We have a lot of Spanish interpretation. I've had some Chinese interpretation, Russian interpretation. So I've become skilled in having an interpreter there with me, not talking over them, making sure that the questions are understood by the person. So there's interpretation that has to be there. Also ASL for deaf persons. Just I've had a lot of experience with all of that interpretive service, just taking a step back and letting that happen, so that due process is best served. And then the other things that I think are important is you may not think this, but jail inmates are even an underserved population because they have no access to anything but a pen and a paper. They have no access to write things out. They're almost all pro se litigants. As much as they can get under your skin, you have to recognize they don't have resources to be able to do things the way other people do. And so to the extent you might have a person who's not educated, write to you as the municipal court judge in pen and paper and say, I can't do this because of A. It's really not incumbent upon you to say, oh, well, this isn't, typed up in 8-point font, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. So I think I bring that to it too, is just an understanding of resources, and just people come from all different varieties of socioeconomic backgrounds. So you want to make sure that you're not using any of your implicit biases or prejudice to weed people out that you think aren't deserving. And just to look at it as though everybody is deserving. Everybody is deserving of justice if they're in this country. That's what the Constitution says. So we start at that, and then we look at each individual nuance from there. And if there are underserved communities who happen to be before me, I'm going to give them their due process. That's the most important thing I do as a judge, is due process. And part of that is listening, giving them interpretation services, giving them access to resources, and not just adjudicating based on what's missing.
Great, thank you. So that was the end of our questions, and we do have a little bit more time if there's any questions you would like to ask or any other information you'd like us to know.
It's just okay. I wrote my questions on my handy
You
dandy
absolutely
phone.
can.
Yeah,
Okay, so
2025.
I know approximately how many hours per week does this person work on average? I know it said Tuesday and Thursday, but there were 3 sessions. So that kind of, I didn't know how that worked.
Sam or Ian, you want to take this? Yeah.
Good, okay. So we have court currently on Thursdays, which is an all-day session, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon. And then we do Tuesday afternoon sessions as well, sometimes in the morning, but generally in the afternoon. And then there's usually a couple, there's work outside of that a little bit, prepping for the hearings, those kind of things.
Mhm.
So it's anywhere from 12 to probably 16 hours a week at the most.
Okay,
Can I ask?
absolutely. Go ahead, please, please.
I'm not asking a question for you, but just to make sure that the applicants are aware, as we move towards automatic traffic enforcement, I think generally we see that scope of work increasing.
Correct.
I don't know if we have a good sense of how much, but it's going to grow.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And that's actually going to touch upon some of my other questions here in a minute. So great.
Good.
Could there, it says the job listing mentions it's Tuesday and Thursday, but could it be subject to growth? And yes, it could.
Yeah.
And is there an anticipation there'll be soon be more than 2 days of court? And yes, it could. So that's fine with me. As Bend grows as a community population wise, is there a future that is foreseen where this could become a full-time position?
I think that depends on what we see in our case numbers. So, and you may be learning here, it's a pretty small court.
Mhm.
So our circuit court handles all like DUIs, right? And misdemeanors. I mean, this is basically purely a traffic court. And then we have some other sort of dog stuff and other municipal codes, but it's pretty much traffic. So that's where, if there is any growth, it's going to be in those areas. I don't see us anytime soon expanding to take on things like misdemeanors or DUIs. The circuit courts are still able to do that pretty well in Oregon. So, so I think we don't know for sure. We are adding another staff member and sort of trying to professionalize even more how we work as a court, but it's still going to be a pretty small municipal court, I think, for the time foreseeable. I don't know if anyone disagrees, but that's what it seems like. Yeah.
And not being familiar with this area, I drove by the court yesterday. It seems to be part of the police department.
Yeah.
Is it a
that's right
room
next to
set
it.
aside?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's attached
Yeah,
to our PD, but
separate courtroom, same building. There's a little bit of separation, but same overall facility. Yes.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. The job listing questions and the questions today both mentioned diversion programs. What are the current diversion programs and what are further anticipated diversion programs?
Who wants to do that? We have the typical sort of traffic court diversion,
Mhm.
one focused on youth and then one that's more general. I think that's the main one. Anything else?
We have a like a fix-it ticket type program things like that that we've utilized as well. We have a violations bureau listing as well. So we do a few things like that, but those are primary, we don't have a huge scope of items.
Okay. And since this currently is a part-time job, is the incumbent allowed to take a second job? And if so, can they take a legal job?
I think, yes, we've had local lawyers act as municipal court judge, as long as you're managing your conflicts. There's no prohibition on that at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then how much community engagement is involved in the position outside of Tuesday and Thursday court dockets? For example, is there outreach, public speaking, anything like that you anticipate?
I don't think that's traditionally been very much of that, besides communicating with council, and traditionally we've had just sort of once a year update to council from the judge. I don't know if there would, ever be future programs of sort of traffic safety outreach that we would want the judge involved. Usually our PD and our communications team are doing all of that.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that would ever be contemplated in the future, but not too much of that going on right now, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Those were the only questions that I had, and I'm happy to answer anything else you might have had based on my
Well, I was
question.
gonna ask just, I mean, one thing just on, I think those are excellent questions, so thank you for them.
Yeah.
And just my own individual perspective is I do feel like there's, the past may not be reflective of what the future of the municipal court judge looks like. And I think that includes some of the relations with council as well. Our needs are changing. Bend is obviously growing. And so I think it's a changing position. I think some aspects of the position are governed by our city charter. For example, I think it's 2-year
Two-year
appointment
under the charter.
is in the charter. So changing that would require a charter change. There is some other role, and it would be in council purview to change some of the other workload expectations and remuneration. So I think there's some opportunities there, but it really depends on the need of the community, and so that I think there's some possibility there. The one question I did want to get though is, can you tell me the correct pronunciation of your name?
Oh, sure. It's Andrea Barraclough.
Andrea Barakov.
Okay.
It's one of those ones that you just learn to, any variation thereof. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As someone with a difficult to pronounce name, I wanted to make sure
I watched your video, so it's Ariel.
that's right. that's
Okay,
right.
Ariel.
Yeah,
Andrea and Aria. Okay,
thank you.
perfect.
Great.
Any other follow-ups? I don't think so. Okay.
One final follow-up for
Sure,
me.
yeah.
What's the next steps? I don't know what your
We are a smaller group that's going to recommend to the full council to make a decision, and we're thinking that will be made at the second meeting in April.
Okay.
So we'll probably move forward from this with some deliberation today, and then that will be when the final.
Okay, great. So around the 2nd of April, I might hear something.
The third
sorry,
Wednesday.
the
after
third
the
Wednesday.
Third Wednesday. Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it very much. And
Being
Yeah.
here.
I hope you all have a very great day and beautiful Bend.
Yeah,
thanks
too.
Take care.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'm impressed with everyone that we talked to today,
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
These are all really
It's
great.
strong group
candidates.
of community. Sure.
So it would be great to come out of this discussion. We have plenty of time to just chat, about who we want to recommend as, I think we could even rank 1, 2, 3
Mhm.
would be great. In case, for whatever reason, the first person decides not to take the offer. So, yeah, anyone's thoughts? Start.
Um,
And staff, please to chime in as well.
Yeah, I feel like we had some really great candidates, and it's great to have good, hard choices. I love it when they make the choice hard. I feel like the one area that I maybe would be interested in hearing Samantha's perspective on is the answer about working with staff, and given some of the potential changes, I'd be curious in hearing more about what that might look like. I think Melanie, you asked for an order. I mean, I think my order would be Zemper, Barakloff, and Powell. I thought each of these candidates brought really strong responses, really strong applications, and I think we would probably be happy to have any of them, but I think, we can go into more detail in a little bit if we want, but I think that's probably the order that I would recommend.
That's pretty much So Zempler number 1, Bearclough 2, and all 3.
Yes.
Yeah, same for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, Erin seems to have the most direct relevant experience, obviously, just because she's, I mean, one, she is working in the role for us, but she's also done it in other communities.
Yes, she has.
And which is bigger, and so maybe a sense of where things might evolve. And maybe a little broader scope of some of the programs that they have there. I appreciated her story about the perspective that she brings and her life experience and stuff in other roles besides legal work. And also, I think we heard from 2 candidates very clearly that are the strongest around the importance of the team as a whole.
And
And
communication.
really emphasizing that. And certainly, there's an advantage to having somebody who already knows our system a little bit.
Right.
And that seems to, as far as I know, has a good working relationship with the staff there.
Yeah. So Erin has been doing work for us, but also has been a municipal
Yes.
judge in Eugene.
Right.
Andrea is an administrative law judge, which is, you're making judicial decisions, but it's not really anything it's not very similar to
Right.
municipal court. And then Carolyn hasn't had judge experience, but lots of government and criminal experience. So yeah, I think I agree with that ranking. Staff, any comments from either staff?
If I could just to underscore, I think what both
What?
of you just said, though, I think Erin's responses to a couple of these questions were incredibly insightful. And
Yeah.
I feel like
Yes.
I feel like I learned something from them, and I
Yeah.
feel like they will give our council some things to think about. Some of
Yes.
the, her response on this question of what the appropriate relationship between the police department and council is. And so I would be curious to hear, what is your perspective on their responses on that? What kind of opportunities do we have, given that we have this new administrative oriented position? What are your thoughts on that?
In specific, in relation to Erin in particular, or just? in
Just when she
general?
was mentioning flow to the decision
Yeah.
makers, will this new staff person deciding those roles? Like,
Yeah,
how
it
do you?
seems like she had really some
Yeah.
strong ideas about what this would be a good time to more clearly define the roles of what
Yes.
we expect our municipal court judge and what do we expect from our court manager.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is an opportunity to define those roles?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we're most excited about. When we put this position together in collaboration with city manager's office as well. It was thinking through, where are the gaps and where do we have potential to really grow and develop? And this manager was kind of that idea, the kind of the impetus of what are the responsibilities around that? And so we are really trying to develop a process where, because we'll still have a supervisor, we're gonna have a manager, and then we'll have the judge. And really making sure that we somehow, strategize together to make them a team. And so how we onboard this judge is very important to us within the court, and how we onboard the court manager at the same time. Along that line of how do we communicate, where are the roles of authority, but also wanting to bring that judge knowledge and skill set into this court, because we have staff members that are 3-4 years into their jobs, who have great potential to grow and to develop. We have a supervisor who has been with the city for a very long time, probably going to retire in the next 3 to 4 years. So we need to begin planning that transition phase. So we're really looking to grow and understand and broaden our opportunities as a court, especially as we see parking coming in, as we see photo enforcement coming in. Erin has expressed, some really interesting ideas around this concept of other opportunities for folks beyond just a diversion program of going to traffic school. What are some other opportunities to help people and reach people, which I think the court gets really excited about, because the court staff really do interact with the folks coming in that have citations. And, they're very mindful of their role. They can't give legal advice. They can't do those things, but they also are very customer service oriented, as we are here as a city, and they carry that at that window. So they really want to try and provide all of these different options and opportunities for folks to be aware of what they have available to them. And I think Erin helps, or any judge that comes in, and the new manager that comes in, we're hoping that nexus of experience, and then Shannon's 18 years, working kind of those front lines, that we'll really be able to take the court to the next
Can I ask a
level.
follow-up question?
Yeah, doing that.
One of the things that Aaron mentioned is, and we saw this in some of the other applications too, was about council's involvement with the municipal court. And Aaron had mentioned this morning that she didn't think that it necessarily had to be the judge coming to council to deliver the message of what's going on with the court. Any thoughts there about what council's role with either the judge or this court manager might look like in the future?
Yeah, I think that what I found, that actually her comments on that very informative and interesting, because there is a lot of information that would be really good for the council to be aware of, such as how many citations did we process? How many people actually paid their citations? How many people, pled guilty? How many trials did we have? How many went to successfully completed diversion programs? I think that's really great data for us to track on a more timely basis and to share, whether that's part of Eric's, reports, just kind of as a monthly status kind of update or something of that nature. I think that's really important. Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of
that sounds
citizens that come into the city, into the court.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Kate, you have anything?
I know we're just here to listen, but I would agree with the ranking that you were suggested. And I was really struck by two of the things that Aaron said about just experience in teaching and bringing people into the justice system, and then the emphasis on team both stood out to me.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I think that will be our recommendation to the bigger council group, and Megan will help me formalize that to be posted for the meeting that will discuss that as a group. I think the other thing is, I think Andrea was looking for a job she could move here for, and I think this isn't quite enough of a job to move here for. But Carolyn lives here, and potentially if we are looking for pro tems, people to fill in, or to learn more of the work and be part of the system, I think she would be a great candidate for that if we're going with Aaron. So
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the charter provides that either the municipal judge and or the council can appoint pro tem judges, and we've typically sort of delegated that responsibility to whoever was serving as the municipal judge at the time, but the charter does actually give council some ability to do that too, so that might be worth discussing. As
and I don't know if that would work for Carolyn. I don't know if she'd want to do that, but I think that would, I think we could say to Erin, and I'm sure that she would be very open to that suggestion of, hey, maybe look at this person as someone to train up as someone who can fill in when you're not available, and if we need to grow court sessions and we need to add another one, maybe we can have another person to help us with that. So.
And if Andrea makes her way here for other reasons, she should.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
I feel like on that point, one thing that is a little bit maybe potentially challenging. I mean, we have some great candidates, which I'm really pleased to see. But thinking about this from the council perspective of, this is our one of only 2 direct employees. I feel like I would like to at least hear from you what you think about the ask. What is, because it seems like if we're asking someone to commit to only 2 years and it's only part-time, and we had a question earlier about, is our expectation that we have someone working on the side part-time? Like, what are we really asking of someone to potentially give up to take this position? Are we expecting them to have essentially another legal career that's on hold in case something, in case they don't get renewed? Or I was kind of surprised the more that we dug into this, that this is a pretty tall ask, I feel like. And I wonder if there's an appetite to maybe make this more of a career-oriented kind of position. I don't know. I don't know enough about what other municipal courts look like, but I feel a little bit frustrated by the idea that we're hampered by a 2-year term by city charter, and that kind of contributes to a little bit of a cyclical kind of revolving door aspect of this. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to make any promises, but I think it just depends on how the court grows and what we see with some of the new policies that we're putting into place. And yeah, I mean, so this is typical, especially of smaller cities. You find a local attorney and they do your muni judge job on the side, right? They do it a few times a month, a few times a week, and then they're a practicing lawyer otherwise. That's sort of the for cities of a certain size. So are we getting to the size where that's not going to work anymore? I think that's a I think that's a valid question.
Mhm.
And so I think especially with hiring the court manager, maybe we're gathering more data, maybe we're kind of starting to make the case, are we moving in that direction?
Mhm.
Is that a change we might need to make? And then later down the line, we can get to the philosophy of council hiring a judge versus staff and, you know.
Yeah.
Some councils hire their city attorneys. It's just
Yeah.
different from charter to charter.
Mm.
And is that still the best policy, or do we need to, you know, see if the community wants to make a change?
Mhm.
So,
Councilor Mendez, I would just note that just like the city manager, the municipal judge always serves at the pleasure of the council. So yes, the charter says there's a 2-year appointment, but typically in the employment agreements, it says what all of our employment agreements say, which is that things could change. So none of this is a guarantee. We obviously hope we hire somebody that council and future councils want to keep renewing. But I think there's a couple questions. One is professionalization and growth of the court. The charter provision about a 2-year appointment, I don't think really stands in the way of any of those things.
So how do you reconcile that with the idea that the judge should be independent and it should be not as political, but at the same time serve that council's pleasure? You know, it seems like we kind of want this independence that's important to provide justice for the community so that it's not as political and there's not just, new council comes in and cleans house or something.
This is a good time for me to say that the judiciary should never be political or politicized. And if it's working well, like it usually does in our country's history, it's usually not much of a problem.
yeah, I think that's a philosophical problem,
Yeah.
discussion for the future. But I think that it is a point we'll take. And is the court going to continue to transform? I think it is. So I think council just needs to stay on top of what's going on and see at what point we need to maybe make some changes.
Well, I think that's why we need to it'd be valuable, I think, to have a little bit more regular updates. And I think I
Yeah.
like the idea of a balance between the judge and the court manager, so that we're hearing from kind of seeing the whole picture. Because I'm not sure, I think that best serves the community.
Any interest in the idea? I mean, I think you sort of serve as a court liaison as de facto.
I was thinking about that too.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, should we have just a counselor sort of assigned to touch base more often than the full council, or do we need to make sure maybe it's just a report, like we have a financial report, maybe there's just a court activity report
Once a quarter
every
or
meeting or
something.
once a quarter. So I think, let's try to remember to talk about a couple of these things with full council too, when we bring this up and see what everyone else's appetite is for that. But I think we have a good consensus on the candidates.
Yeah.
So this was a productive
Yeah,
meeting. Yay.
great, so thank you.
They were all really good. Oh, please. All right, that's it, Morgan. Thank you.
Thanks.